If there is in fact a huge threat worldwide and you have 2 billion people that are the threat, why haven't they done something now? The emphasis and their efforts to try to make you hate specifically Hezbollah and the Muslims. There is a pre-programming in America that there's always been a hatred towards the Middle East, specifically any of the Arabs. They hate them. They want us to hate them. They want us to go into wars against them. This is what's going on, guys. This is the agenda. This is why in our existence, the only nation you cannot question is Israel, because they have a grip hold on our nation. They have a grip hold on a lot of nations. There's a video that I'm going to share with you guys that surfaced on this topic about Israel and their agenda. What's up, guys? This is God, Grit, and Glory, and I am your host, Veto Creed. We talk about the stuff that most people stay quiet about: Jesus, business, politics, and occasionally a few conspiracy theories. No scripts, no filters, just straight up truth. So join us as we unravel and speak truth. Welcome, listeners. This is Veto Creed with God, Grit, and Glory. So we're kind of back in the weeds here, talking about, once again, full circle. You can't get on the internet recently and not run into so much crap that surrounds all the propaganda trash that's being shilled out. You just can't. In fact, there's so much of it, it's infuriating to me. This is all starting to make a whole lot of sense to me. The Jews are notorious for doing the kind of stuff that they do. They're one of the few people. Let me make this make sense, right? There are allegedly 2 billion. Let this sink in. This is a big statement. There are 2 billion Muslims worldwide. 2 billion. Now, if these supposed Quran-loving, Muslim-loving, Islam-loving fanatics, Hezbollah, as I think it's one of Bibi's favorite words. He loves calling them Hezbollah this and Hezbollah that. If they were as bad as he claimed they are, and I'm not look, I'm not saying that Islam is not a counter religion to Christianity. It is, in fact. Islam is responsible for a lot of deaths worldwide, but we're talking about proportionality here. We're talking about proportionality of threats. If there is, in fact, a huge threat worldwide, and you have 2 billion people that are the threat, why haven't they done something now? If Islam has 2 billion people worldwide, and you guys can look up the statistic, it's actually a pretty astonishing statistic. Why have they not done anything? I mean, come on, let's think about this logically. 2 billion people, 2 billion, that's not 200 million. That's 2 billion. If you look at the percentage of Jews, and this is not necessarily extreme Jews or Zionists or anything like that. This is just Jews in general. There's 15 million Jews total worldwide. And if you took that number, you got 15 million Jews divided by 2 billion. That is 0.0075 of that population. So wouldn't you think that if you have this many people, this many fanatics worldwide, that they would stir up a lot more problems? Wouldn't you think if Islam was in fact the biggest threat with Hezbollah and Al Qaeda and you name it, all of the terms, the terroristic terms that they've coined over the years to try to go into infiltrate the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, we know the stories, the war stories, Iraq, now we're in Iran. Iran. They call it Iran. It's not Iran, it's Iran. But let me tell you something interesting about this situation is the emphasis and their efforts to try to make you hate specifically Hezbollah and the Muslims. There is a pre-programming in America. We know this if we're awake. We know this if we're human and we're alive. That there's always been a hatred towards the Middle East, specifically any of the Arabs.
What do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10. I can't even do anything anymore. I just want to be a doctor or anything to help my people, my kids. I'm just a kid. I don't even know what to do. I get scared, but not really that much. I do anything for my people, but I don't know what to do. I'm just 10. I'm just 10. All of this, when I see, I literally cry every day, saying to myself, why do we deserve this? What did we do to this? My family said they just hate us. They just don't like us because we are Muslim. Why does Muslim act for you like that? You see all of the kids around me? They're just kids. Why wouldn't you just send a missile to them and kill them? It's not fair. Not fair.
They hate them. They want us to hate them. They want us to go into wars against them. I mean, I'm going to share a lot of stuff throughout this podcast, kind of what believes, what they originally believe, what the Zionists believe, and where we are. You know, what actually happened. I mean, the crazy part is I had a 4-part series couple months back on in general, how we go through the weeds about Auschwitz, how we talk about the gas chambers, how we talk about all of these things. I'm going to bring up some points here because I keep seeing videos kind of surface. And by the way, just to give you guys a little bit of understanding, I share a lot of content to my Instagram page. So what I do is I just share it to myself or share it to my God, Grit, and Glory page. And I go back and then try to look through it. I went through all of the videos I shared with myself in the last 7-8 months. About a third of them are gone. A third of them are completely gone. It says unavailable. And the more I'm scrolling up, then the further back I go, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, the more of them are gone. So Meta does a really good job trying to filter and get rid of this content. This is why I came up with TruthStack. And TruthStack was actually an idea that I had that allows you to go in there, copy and paste any URL. So you could copy that video to share it. You hit share, you hit copy, you go into TruthStack, you paste it, and it literally saves the video to a cloud if you have that membership, or it saves it to your phone. So that way they can't ever get rid of it. TruthStack is where videos go to be saved permanently, intentionally permanently forever. But we're going to talk about another thing because I look, when Pam Bondi was in office, and when I think they asked specifically Kash Patel about this, they asked about the JFK files. They asked about the JFK files because they still haven't been declassified. And they keep teeter-tottering around this, and they do this on purpose because there is this tactic that is used. And Trump did this. Governments do this all the time, where they tell you just enough, but not enough for you to get the answers, and then they allow the internet to sort of take over, right? So let's remember what happened when Trump got assassinated, or assassination attempt. Every single one of them, but let's talk about the one that's the OG, the one that helped get him elected. What happened to the killer? What happened to all the evidence? Why was nothing ever talked about? Why was everything swept under the rug? Why was all of a sudden all of these situations kind of covered up? Well, it's because that's what Israel does. Israel's notorious for this. Let's go through the alleged JFK assassination. So you can't talk about Kennedy assassination without talking about or Mossad. Let's be honest here. They're the main people involved. The prime minister of Israel said that without nuclear weapons, would not survive. Now, this is back in the days before JFK got assassinated in 1963. Kennedy kept pushing for neutral scientists to inspect Dimona reactor. The Dimona reactor is what they allegedly needed nuclear power for. They were claiming the fact that they needed nuclear power in a reactor. They kind of framed it in a way where they said, "Oh, it's our nuclear power. It's to power our grid." They didn't position it in a way where we needed it for a bomb. He worked with CIA Director John McCone on this. And these are all facts, by the way. You can go in there and even ChatGPT will confirm this. Israel set up a fake control room before the inspection, and inspectors were never allowed to inspect the actual reactor. And that's what the agreement they wanted to make. They wanted to basically approve everything willy-nilly and turn around and say, yeah, no, we approve it. But when Kennedy said they started probing, and I quote his exact words, "Those sons of bitches lie to me constantly about their nuclear capabilities." He actually said this. There's record of this. The Jewish community invited JFK to Dallas one day, spontaneously. And by the way, the Jewish community is the B'nai B'rith. The B'nai B'rith is the one that hosted this event. The event was sponsored by Dallas Citizens Council. That is correct. That you can look that statement up. Julius Sheps directed the Dallas Citizens Council. He was very influential, by the way, and he was involved very, very deeply with this. Julius Sheps was a member of the B'nai B'rith. Now, for people that have been paying attention to me, B'nai B'rith was the organization that found the ADL. They were also the organization that wrote the encyclopedia in 1906 that published how many Jews were everywhere. Now, look, they were already planning all this crap everywhere. They were trying to create this narrative that, 9.5 million people lived in Europe, specifically Jews lived in Europe. They were already paving the way. They knew what they were up to. They said, we have to be so strategic about this that there is no questions that this happens. Abraham Zapruder, was a member of the B'nai B'rith. Also correct. Zapruder filmed the assassination. Correct. Ironically, the Jew had a film. Now, keep in mind, this is not when everybody's walking around recording everything and everybody has access to phones. This is back in the days where it was so difficult to get any recordings. We're talking about 60 years ago, almost 70 now. 70 years ago, nobody had a phone, so it wasn't very accessible. Zapruder Company was headquartered in Dallas Tech's building, which is the Dow Tech's building. You guys can look this up. Also correct. And what's interesting is a lot of these were fact-checked. I went in there and fact-checked all of these. Ballistic studies prove the first 2 shots came from Dow Tech's building. And I like how ChatGPT came back and said, this is the minority theory. The prevailing forensics conclusion placed the shots from Texas School Book Depository, although some independent researchers disagree. It kind of gives you a really vague, there's a possibility that could have happened, but it probably didn't happen. So we're not going to say that it's false or true, but we're going to still label it false. Because we're not going to credit these independent sources. We're going to go off of what our ballistics say, what our government basically said, which is controlled by Israel. The Dow Tech's building was owned by David Weisblatt. David Weisblatt was one of the biggest financiers of the ADL. Are you guys understanding how all of this is tying together now? And this is all correct. Douglas Gaff was one of London Johnson's biggest donors. The host committee was chaired by Sam Bloom. Also correct. Sam Bloom pushed the hardest to have Oswald transferred. Jack Ruby shot Oswald during the transfer. Jack Ruby's last name was Rubenstein. So something's going on here. They obviously don't want to leak, right? Mossad is notorious. Mossad is notorious for doing this kind of crap. They obviously have this person that is being transferred, right? So Sam Bloom, so for people that don't know, Oswald was the one that actually shot JFK, allegedly, right? And let me go back to this story. There was 2 shots that were fired from the Dallas Tex, so Dal Tex building. But it wasn't actually those 2 shots that killed him. So there was a plan B. So it was the actual driver who turned around and shot him in the face. It was quite literally plan B because their first plan failed. They didn't have the precision that they have now. And plus, Jews are a lot smarter now about this stuff. They don't use guns. They use lapel mics, sort of like they did with Charlie Kirk. So that is very ironic that his last name is Rubenstein, which is, of course, Jewish. They are notorious for cleaning up the mess. They are notorious for cleaning up everything and getting rid of all of the loose ends. Yes, they do not like loose ends. Jews do not like loose ends. They like to wipe everything clean as a whistle. The reactor went critical right after Kennedy's death. Israel got the bomb a year or 2 later. This is correct. You can fact check this. Kennedy dies, Israel gets the bomb. This isn't a coincidence, guys. So let this sink in. Kennedy opposes Israel to have a nuclear bomb. He starts questioning their narrative and he starts questioning their motives for why they need nuclear power. He says, hey, I want to go in there and I want to inspect everything and I want to make sure that you guys are actually using this nuclear to produce energy. They're like, no, you can't see anything. We're not going to share anything with you. He opposes. He's like, oh, they're always lying to me. They're like, okay, enough's enough. He's going to expose us for who we are. We got to get rid of him. They go in there, they assassinate him, they kill him. Lyndon B. Johnson is the one that replaces him. He's a huge Zionist. He is pro. They get their weapons within a year or 2. This is what's going on, guys. This is the agenda. Charlie Kirk, extremely pro for literally half a decade. Something shifts. He realizes that Israel is starting to get a little too aggressive. They're starting to infiltrate his cause, his organization. He's starting to realize that there are so much donations coming to Turning Point Action, Turning Point USA, Turning Point, all of the faith. They're infiltrating the organization from all sides. And he goes back and he says, this is enough's enough. This has got to stop. And they want their propaganda everywhere. They want their Israeli propaganda, basically pushed in all corners. This is why when I keep talking about this, 2 years ago when I walked into the Turning Point USA conference in Tampa, Florida, the number one thing that I seen when I walked in, the first thing that I seen at their exhibits was a 60-foot exhibit with like a 25-foot flag. Yes, let that sink in. This is the world we live in right now. This is the world that surrounds us. And so as we understand all of these coincidences, as we're reading through, that person's a Jew, that person's a Jew, B'nai Brit owners, these people that are highly influential, all these people that are involved in this organization happen to all be Jews. See, the thing is, it's a lot harder to cover this up now. Now that it's so, information is so easily accessible. Like, I'm going to tell you how much of this was actually correct. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out of all of the statements that I made, only 3 of them, ChatGPT found false. But even the false, they would not exactly dispute it. The reason they call it dispute, this is the really funny thing about fact checking. When a fact checker checks a fact, if it finds anything in the claim that's false, even remotely false, like partly true, it will deem the entire fact false. So if you say set up a fake control room before the inspection, it will go over here and it'll say it didn't do that because even though that was a fake control room, there were some elements of it that were true, like stuff like that. It's so outlandish that you listen to it and you're like, are you guys serious? Like, are we living in like, idiocracy land or the Twilight Zone? This is the way they position themselves. This is why in our existence, the only nation you cannot question is Israel, because they have a grip hold on our nation. They have a grip hold on a lot of nations. And to this day, Germany is still paying reparations to Israel. Let that sink in. They are still victimizing themselves to the point where Germany still pays them reparations, because apparently Germany still feels bad about the fact that they were 6 million of them were. There's a lot of videos that surfaced. There's a video that I'm going to share with you guys that surfaced on this topic about and their agenda.
None of the facilities examined at Auschwitz, Birkenau, or London could have supported, or in fact did ever support, multiple executions utilizing hydrogen cyanide, carbon monoxide, or any other allegedly or factually lethal gas. Based upon very generous maximum usage rates for all the alleged gas chambers, totaling some 1,693 persons per week, and assuming these facilities could support gas executions, it would have required 68 years to execute the alleged number of 6 million persons.
So this guy makes a claim that in order to run these gas chambers, you would have to literally run them 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. Yes. Imagine that. 24 hours a day. And it would take over 60 years to burn 6 million bodies because of the 1,600 chambers. It said it was a human impossibility. But don't math. Don't you dare use math, because if you use math, they're going to prove themselves wrong. They're going to look like fools.
They murdered 1 million people in Auschwitz using poison gas. Why is there no trace of that gas in the buildings of Auschwitz today? And none of us historians thought of demanding that there should be tests carried out on the fabric of the gas chambers at Auschwitz. The buildings survived partly. They're in ruins, some of them, others are more or less intact. And eventually, in 1988, as part of this Canadian trial that I mentioned, the case against Ernst Zundel, the defense lawyers decided to send an expert in gas chambers over to Auschwitz. So this expert in gas chambers, a man called Fred Leuchter, was sent over to Auschwitz to test the gas chambers of the Nazi concentration camp. Would these gas chambers work? Is there any trace of their having been used as gas chambers? Is there any residue of cyanide gas in the walls? All the obvious questions. And he came back and he wrote an affidavit for the court, which we eventually published as the Leuchter Report. The forensic tests carried out on the 48 samples that he brought back to the United States, bits of brickwork that he took out of the walls and submitted to the forensic laboratories in Cornell University to have tests carried out. And the result was that in 47 of the 48 samples, there wasn't the slightest significant trace of cyanide compound. In the 48th sample, there were colossal traces of cyanide. And what is the explanation of that result? Well, the answer is in that sample, he had taken out of a little gas chamber that was used for disinfesting clothing, killing the lice and the vermin in the prisoners' clothing. The clothing was stuffed into this little gas chamber, which looked like a gas chamber. He got a steel door with the racks rather like a dry cleaners for wheeling the clothing in and out, and he took that sample out of that brickwork. It's significant because all our opponents have said you don't expect to find cyanide in the brickwork after 50 years. How absurd, how ludicrous. After 50 years of wind and rain, you're not going to find cyanide compounds, residue of a gas in the brickwork. And the answer is you do. And the proof of that answer is, in fact, the walls of that little gas chamber were so soaked in cyanide compounds that they'd turned blue. Got photographs of it here, what those blue walls look like. You can see here color photographs of the little gas chamber in Auschwitz showing the blue stain on the walls where the cyanide has seeped through the brickwork A young 28-year-old German chemist, a research chemist working at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. The Max Planck Institute is one of the most prestigious bodies with the kind of reputation of the National Institutes of Health here in Bethesda, Maryland. He decided to write his dissertation on that one subject, the permanence of cyanide compounds in brickwork. And having written his dissertation, he then allowed it to be circulated in printed form to 2,000 professors of chemistry at universities, who confirmed that what he had written was true. Too late, the traditional enemy spotted what he did, and they had him dismissed from his position at the Max Planck Institute. The letters have now been published, where they put pressure on the Max Planck Institute for him to be dismissed, allowing his scientific report, his dissertation, to be published. Under the German laws for the suppression of free speech, he had infringed against those laws, and he's now been sent to prison for 14 months for allowing his chemical results to be circulated in Germany.
Because there's not enough logical, rational, and people out there that have any true understanding, knowledge, and foresight to decipher between all of the noise. So this is what they do. They confuse. And oftentimes they'll do this. They did this with Charlie Kirk's assassination, where they gave you just enough information, and then the Candace Owens of the world basically ran with it. And they understand that there's going to be 50 or 100 or 1,000 other people that are going to create their narrative. And they're not even going to care about the facts, because as long as there's 999 conspiracies and one true, you're not going to be able to decipher between the noise, because all of that is just noise at that point. Whether true or false, they're not going to give you enough information for you to get to that motive, to get to that conclusion. They're going to give you just enough for you not to have enough. And so it's pretty disgusting. This is why in a dozen countries, it is illegal. You can actually go to prison for being a Holocaust denier. I remember I got into an argument with Grok about this. I said, hey, we started talking about the Holocaust. I talk about this in one of my other podcasts. And we're going back and forth. And I point out the fact that the Holocaust, which, by the way, the Holocaust is going on in Gaza right now, that is a true Holocaust, a true extermination of the people, the cleansing of Gaza, as Charlie Kirk liked to refer to it. That's actually Holocaust. They're being sacrificed. For people that don't know what Holocaust means, it's a sacrifice. That's literally the true meaning. And the true Gazonians, if you can call them, or Gaza. Is there a term like that? Anyways, the people that live in Gaza, they're the ones that are being sacrificed. The children, the women, obviously the men. And they're not remorseful. And they know Gaza cannot defend themselves. Gaza doesn't have the military complex that America has that's backing. Neither does any other surrounding country. Egypt doesn't have the military complex. The only country that even remotely stands a chance to defend themselves, even remotely, is Iran. Iran is the only country that can defend itself. And they know if they dismantle Iran, that they will ultimately win this war. And they're going to have control over all of the Middle East. Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon. All of these countries have no nuclear power, first of all. They also don't have any actual military complex. In other words, they don't have access to any military that's going to come in there and back them. So Israel is essentially creating a war, intentionally creating a war between the Christians and guess who? The Muslims. The Christians and the Muslims, they're creating a war intentionally. And they're turning around and they're manipulating all of America by coercion, by blackmail, via Epstein files and other ways and other methods. And they're getting them to do this. What's going to eventually happen is America, which is the Christians, and Iran are going to both turn on Israel and they're going to off. That is exactly what's going to happen, because it's just a matter of time. And that's going to probably be when Armageddon happens. That's going to be the punishment. And believes, this is what Israel believes, the fact that when that happens, their Messiah, their God of the Torah, is going to stand up and kill the Edomites, which is, they believe, the Christians, and it's going to annihilate everybody. And then 2/3 of America is going to, basically 2/3 of, the world is going to be dead. 2/3.
Gog and Magog is you want to call it World War III, you want to call it the end of all wars, whatever you want to call it. It's called Gog and Magog according to the Torah. This war will start with a war between Ishmael, which is the Muslims, and Edom, which is the Christians. It's going to be a world war. Initially, they're going to kill each other, fight each other, try to destroy each other, but then they're going to turn around, stop the fight, and then both of them attack Israel. Obviously, the war is never going to stop. It's going to be a continuously built war and so on, but at some point, the Mashiach is going to come. The Jewish Mashiach is going to come. Not the Christian Mashiach, not the Arab Mashiach. The Jewish Mashiach is going to come, and the war is going to take the next big step. Once the Mashiach, son of David, will come, he will fight against the enemies of Am Yisrael. He will defeat all of them. 2/3 of the world are going to die, are going to be destroyed during these wars, some at different parts, but 2/3 of the world will die in a short period of time. The Gaon Vilna says 8 minutes. There's going to be a nuclear war where there's, as part of this Gog and Magog, where in 8 minutes, 2/3 of the world are going to die. 1/3 will remain. That third that remains, some of them will survive. The only people that are going to survive are Jews that are righteous Jews, that are Torah observant. They're observing Shabbat, they're observing family purity, they're observing the Torah. That is what gives us a right to exist. The Gentiles, they have to observe the 7 Noahide laws, which are fewer but not necessarily easy. Once the Mashiach comes, once it is clear to everyone that the only divine document that has ever existed and exists today is the Torah and nothing else. Not the Quran, not the New Testament, not the Buddhist teachings. That means that everyone is going to accept or reject it. There's no middle ground. Either you accept it or you reject it. This is going to be the process. This is going to determine who's going to survive, who's not. People that accept it 100% are going to be the part of the people that survive. People that reject it, fight against it, are going to be part of the 2/3 of the world that die.
So how does that actually happen? How does 2/3 of the world die?
What do the Jews believe? Well, the Jews believe that because they disobeyed God, because they worshiped false idols, because they sinned, they were expelled by God from their homeland, Jerusalem, to wander the earth, which creates the Jewish diaspora. But eventually what will happen is that a Jewish Messiah will emerge to take the Jews back to Jerusalem, okay? And he will reconstitute the nation of Israel. He will recreate Israel, and then he will rebuild Solomon's temple. Why? Because Solomon's temple is where God lives, and it is where the people of Israel make sacrifices to Yahweh in order to show their devotion to Yahweh. So Solomon's temple is really important. There will be something called the War of Gog and Magog, where basically the entire world unites against Israel. Okay? And the War of Gog and Magog will be led by the Antichrist, the anti-Messiah, the false prophet. We don't know what Gog and Magog represent, okay? What the Bible says is these are people from the north, but that could be anyone. And certain Jewish scholars have interpreted Gog and Magog to represent Russia and Iran. Okay? This is important because of what's happening today. Okay? But of course, when it seems as though the enemies of Israel, Gog and Magog, when it seems that they are about to win, God will intervene and ensure that Israel wins. And this will usher in something called the Messianic age, when Israel becomes the most dominant nation on earth, when it becomes the light of nations, when it becomes the light of the world. Okay? Does that make sense? So that is the Jewish eschatology.
Well, what happens is when Iran and America start to bomb, being the ruthless, careless, and reckless country that they are is going to use their nuclear power. So is the one that's going to potentially, like, ultimately destroy our planet. It is the one that's going to destroy. Because if you look at what their motives are, they have no motives whatsoever. They have absolutely no motives other than they're power hungry and they want to control. They've done it in America to infiltrate. Did Muslims come to America and infiltrate America? Do Muslims control all of America? Just think about that for a second. How many Muslims do you know that have access to your kids' education, that have access to your banking systems, that have access to your kids', social media, that have access to your search engine browsers, that have access to your AI bots? Do you know anybody? Can you even name one Muslim that has access to any of these things? And they hide behind God. And they say, well, God of the Torah, Adonai, they say Adonai, or God of the Torah, ultimately is the one that's blessing us. They are failing to explain the fact that they are being backed by another God. And that God is not God of the Bible. That God is Satan. Satan is the one that's backing them. And what's going to happen is ultimately the Antichrist, which, by the way, ADL recently came out and said it is now anti-Semitic to say I hate the Antichrist for whatever reason. Why are the Jews so interested in blocking people from disliking somebody like the Antichrist? Well, it's because the Antichrist is the one that's going to be set up. And they are the ones being called the Antichrist right now. So they don't want people knowing that. So they're going to stop anything they can from people being able to speak out truth. And I've already said this many, 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 many times. Israel is the one that's going to be responsible for killing freedom of speech. So that word on Charlie Kirk's chest, he doesn't always wear a shirt that says freedom, by the way. What do you think that product placement actually does? By destroying Charlie and his shirt imploding and blowing up from the lapel mic, which we're going to get into here in a minute, they are ultimately saying that you guys have no freedom. It's a mockery. It's a mockery and it's an attack on our freedoms, because it says that although you guys believe you guys have freedom, you have little to none. So let's get into that Charlie Kirk assassination again. I mean, we've talked about it time in and time again. Now, there's an overlap here of the way things are done with the Mossad, with the way that Charlie Kirk was shot. And I say that very loosely because he wasn't shot. His lapel mic exploded, right? We see people like Candace Owens and specifically Stu Peters, and there's a handful of people that have done investigative work out there that have gotten to the bottom of the lapel mic exploding. There's somebody that did some, heat revision analysis where they see the heat coming out of the side where the lapel mic is, and his shirt kind of flares out. Somebody did a replication of this using a 3D model. Also, it literally perfectly imitates what happens in Charlie Kirk's video. And then there's all sorts of evidence. When the lapel mic explodes, there's a picture of Charlie Kirk having little black things on his hand while he's holding his mic. You guys can find this information, by the way. And as he's holding the mic and that microphone explodes on his lapel mic explodes. And by the way, he's holding the microphone. It wasn't his microphone that exploded. It was the microphone, basically receiver that's strapped to him, right? And it's going through him here. And that's the way it's done intentionally. The Jews have had this in the bag for a while. We see that there was an incident with their pagers exploding in a previous attack that they for. This is what they do. This is their practice. They literally use explosives. So after this happens, his CIA detail, right? We'll say it's his personal security, but we know that's not the case. It's Mossad. They literally grab him quickly. What's one of the first things they do when they grab him? They strip him of his mic. the remaining basically things that are hanging out. Somebody literally grabbed it and they got rid of it because they don't want evidence. And when he's getting dragged into the car, they lay him down. And by the way, for people that are moronic, they will believe the narrative that they are pushing here in mainstream media. If a person got shot in his neck, there would be a bloodbath. You know what artery is here? It's your main artery, the one that goes in your neck, the one that goes to your brain, the one that circulates everything to your heart. This is your biggest artery here. It goes into your neck. And this is why our necks are usually pretty big in diameters, to protect us against puncturing our main artery in our neck, because we'll bleed out the fastest. If anybody ever wants to, wanted to assassinate you, very, very, guerrilla tactic style, they would literally come and slit your throat. This is what the mafia used to do, because that is the quickest way you'll die. Because when you don't have blood pumping into your heart, you die instantly. And of course, when it hits oxygen, then you're completely gone. You're completely gone. So the fact that all of this is happening, they grab him, they strip him of his mic, they're cleaning up the scene a little bit as they're walking behind him, and they throw him in the truck, and there's shrapnel and glass literally everywhere. Candace Owens recently released a video, which I'm going to share with you guys, about somebody doing the evidence and finding a USB mic sign as it zoomed in, cleaned up the quality, and it's a USB mic sign inside of the truck, the one that they were trying to take him out on. So it was somewhere on his shirt, on his body, and as they were laying him down, all that shrapnel, all of that glass from the mic fell onto the carpet inside the vehicle, and you could see it there. This is what's going on, guys. And this is why they had to bring in an emergency construction crew to clean up all of the shrapnel. Somebody will say, well, yeah, they were trying to clean up a bullet. There's no bullet. There is no bullet. And by the way, I have reason to believe that he was possibly shot at. The thing is I believe he might have been shot at from the back. And because they literally missed, they literally had to do the lapel mic. Similar to what happened with JFK. That's my own opinion, because I don't think they probably timed everything's going to be so perfect, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe they just do it for misdirection. It could be that. They do it for misdirection. They have the shooter, of course, because it has to look real. Let's get this straight. It has to look real. So this is why when Trump's assassination happened, there was a casualty. They can't have a person try to shoot him and nobody actually finds a bullet. The bullet ends up being in somebody. So somebody ended up actually dying at Trump's staged assassination in order for them to support their narrative. And who's behind Trump's assassination? Is that all a show? I don't believe it was a show. I lean on the side that it was real, but it was just real enough for the Mossad to tell Trump that you better cooperate or else. You better do this or else. We're going to kill all the people around you. They did this with Charlie Kirk. He was one of the biggest supporters of Trump known to man. And then basically Trump had to turn his back on Charlie Kirk. We could see that in his interview post Charlie Kirk's assassination, where they ask him, how do you feel about one of your closest supporters, one of your biggest advocators dying on national television? And Trump's exact response was, did you guys see my ballroom? I'm building a ballroom. It was like instantly like this squirrel moment where, in fact, we know what's going on. He doesn't want to talk about it because he knows he had something to do with it. He knows that he was a casualty. He knows that he died because of their secret agenda. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what they're doing. This is the world we live in, guys. We live in a world of idiocracy right now where they think we are fools. But do not be deceived. These Jews, they are talked about in Revelation. They are talked about where most of the Zionists are ignoring this. And I'm going to be sharing this video about these Jews and what the Bible actually says about this. The reason why you have the Greg Lauries of the world and Franklin Graham basically shilling for Zionism right now is because they literally are part of the programming, part of the agenda. I'm also going to share a video about the Khazarians and where the Jews actually come from.
What happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia. And they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. And to reduce this so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they set up this big Khazar kingdom. 800,000 square miles. Only there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and so powerful that when the other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would loan them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. Now, they were phallic worshippers. Which is filthy. I don't want to go into the details of that now. It was their religion, the way it was the religion of many other pagans or barbarians elsewhere in the world. Now the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith, or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism. So, like spinning a top, he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and he picked out so-called Judaism. And that became the state religion, and he sent down to the Talmudic schools of Tel Aviv and Surah, and brought up thousands of these rabbis with their teachings, and he opened up synagogues and schools in his kingdom of 800,000 people, 800,000 square miles, and maybe 10 to 20 million people, and they became what we call Jews.
Now, this video, I found it very peculiar that it had a censor. It wouldn't let me share it. It would have to make me go through like 3 or 4 steps to copy, to see, to share. They really try to silence, shadow ban, and cover up these videos. And then I also share what the actual Jews believe.
Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down at your feet and make them know that I have loved you. You must define who Revelation chapter 3, verse 9 is. Because I don't see any Christian Zionists talking about this passage at all. They're just talking about, you gotta support the Jews. They're God's chosen people. Ted Cruz went so far as to say, listen, that if you say Christ is king, that's an anti-Semitic statement now. Is that crazy? He said it. That is a man who has received millions of dollars from AIPAC and cannot be trusted. I'm actually thankful that the mask is off the Zionists. America is a vassal state and has been for some time. John F. Kennedy threatened Israel, the prime minister, and he said, hey, we're going to oversee your nuclear program or you're not going to have one. And he said, you will seriously jeopardize, this is a quote, seriously jeopardize, end quote, the relationship between the U.S. and Israel if we don't oversee your nuclear program. He got shot a few months later. Publicly, ritualistically, in front of everybody, we run your country. Charlie Kirk starts speaking out about Zionism, being negative about it, shot in the throat, publicly, ritualistically, in front of all of us. Well, I'm not thankful for their deaths, but I am thankful that it has caused so many to question what's going on. Why are we attacking Iran? Israel wants to. That's a vassal state. When another king says, raise up your army and come fight this other king with me, read it in the Bible. That's a vassal state. My question is, do you still want to be a vassal state? And if you don't, you're going to need to learn who the synagogue of Satan are so that you understand you're not dealing with the Jews of the Bible. They don't return and rule Jerusalem until the day of the Lord when Jesus returns. That's clear in Jeremiah. That's clear in Ezekiel and multiple other prophets. They don't come rule Jerusalem until Jesus comes. If you just understood that much of Bible prophecy, you would know, oh, the group that's there right now isn't the Jews. So Ptolemy writes this, quote, "The Jews are such by nature and from the beginning, whilst the Idumeans, Edomites, were not Jews from the beginning, but Phoenicians and Syrians, but being afterwards subdued by the Jews and compelled to be circumcised and to unite into one nation and to be subject to the same laws, they were called Jews. They were called Jews not because of their descent, but in regard to their religion and manner of life. Hence, it was that the kingdom of Herod and his posterity were called, quote, the kingdom of the proselytes, end quote, by the Hebrews." This all comes down to Jacob and Esau. Esau pretending now to be Jacob and steal his lands, and Jacob soon coming and taking back the land on the day of the Lord.
And then I share a very ironic video that talks about you need 2,000 tons of coke a day, and that's not the cocaine that you sniff.
If you're cremating 60,000 people a day, you're going to need a huge quantity of coke. We know, and any crematorium expert or manager here in downtown Cincinnati will confirm this, that if you've got a coke-operated crematorium, it takes 30 or 40 or 50 kilograms of coke for each cadaver. So you're looking at a huge quantity of coke being required every day for these figures you read about in the newspapers now, about 2,000 tons of coke a day. But we have aerial photographs of Auschwitz that were taken during the war, taken by American and British and South African planes. Photographs that are so detailed, I have them with me. Photographs that are so detailed you can see the people walking around in the streets of the camp. There's no signs of huge quantities of coke, no mountains of coke, there are no huge mass graves either, no pits, no lines of people waiting outside the gas chambers. All these legends begin to dissolve when you look at these photographs under a magnifying glass. We can be very precise about the coke, in fact, because in the Russian archives, which have now become available, where I've worked too in Moscow, the secret archives of the Soviet Union, they found the entire operating documents of the Auschwitz concentration camp, including the quantities of coke that were supplied for the crematoria throughout the entire period. It's a figure worth making a mental note of. 2,188 tons of coke were supplied to Auschwitz from start to finish, which is enough to cremate 70 or 80,000 bodies again. So you're coming roughly to a figure of about 100,000 bodies, which is again confirmed, oddly enough, by the Russians who released to the Western powers 4 years ago the death books of Auschwitz, which contain all the death certificates of everyone who died in Auschwitz. 46 bound volumes of death certificates with a total of 66,000 names. So again, you've got an order of magnitude of how many people died. And if most of those people died of natural causes and a fraction died of being executed or murder or brutality, this is still a crime, I'm not denying that. But we then come to a point which I mentioned earlier, the innocenticide factor comes in. Because if of those 100,000 people who died in Auschwitz, even a quarter were murdered, 25,000. Remember the picture I showed you here? On the one hand, 25,000 people being murdered in Auschwitz over the entire war years, and on the other hand, 40,000 people being burned alive in 20 minutes. The whole world talks about the one crime, endless television movies are made about it, you're all made to feel guilty about it, the other crime is swept under the carpet as though it never happened. And when a British historian comes along and repeatedly talks about it, he's the one who finds himself being put in handcuffs and deported and hounded around the world and finding doors slammed in his face from Pretoria to Vancouver.
Basically, that's the cocaine, the cyanide, coke. Basically, it's like ammunition for these cyanide burn chambers, gas chambers, you call it, a day to kill the amount of Jews that were killed, right? So they have all of these videos. They have all of these photos. They have all of these photos of, from aerial space. There are no Jews lined up standing behind gas chambers. So the point is all of these Jews, even if all of them died, the number equates to maximum about 100,000 Jews. And there's skeptics that say it's about 66,000 max. Let's just say out of the 66,000 that died, half of them died from natural causes because look, there was typhoid, there was a bunch of other viruses and things, and they died from ticks and other things that were infecting all these people. And part of the reason, by the way, why they shaved all their heads is there was a massive lice outbreak. And they cut all their, because they didn't have the medicine that they have now, they had to cut all their hair off to make sure that the lice didn't spread. So they didn't because they didn't shave their head because they were like prisoners and they wanted to embarrass them. They used that as a means of making themselves seem like they were more vicious than they really were. But let this sink in. The 2,000 tons that you need, there's not a single picture. I'm going to share 2 videos here. Obviously, one that talks about the amount of actual time it would take just for capacity reasons. This is the one that's absolutely indisputable. The capacity thing, it'll make your brain hurt a little bit because these cyanide gas chambers are not advanced enough. Now, think about this. This is 100-year-old technology. We don't have, I'm sure you can create an incinerator right now that can burn probably about, 1,000 times hotter. The best they had back in the old days was cyanide gas chambers, which didn't burn as hot, so it would take a much longer amount of time to burn these bodies. But not only that, guess what happens when you burn all of these bodies? You have the residue. You have the residue that's left from the bodies. Where is all that residue? Where is all that? What did they do with it? You know what happens when somebody gets cremated? There's the body ash that's left over. If you burned, let's actually ask ChatGPT. If you burned 1 million bodies, how much ash in tons would you have? It says the cremated adult typically leaves about 4 to 5 pounds of ash bone fragments. For 1 million bodies, you would have 8 million pounds converted to tons. That would be about 4 US tons of ash. I'm sorry, I apologize. 4,000 tons of ash. So for people that know basic math, that would be about 24,000 tons of ash. Let's ask it another question. If you were to spread this ash over a football field, how many football fields would you need? So if you did 1 inch of ash, let this sink in. 1 inch of ash, you would need about 34 football fields for 1 inch of ash. 34 football fields. Do you guys believe that the Auschwitz camp actually could sustain this amount of stuff? Now, keep in mind that this is for 1 million. If it's for 6 million, you would need like 200 football fields. 200 football fields to supposedly spread all this ash. Assuming an American field, including the red zone, is 57,600 square feet. Another way to look at it is one football field, 1 million cremated bodies would create a layer roughly 1.4 to 2.8 feet deep, depending on the amount of remains per person. These are approximate calculations because cremation remains varies but by body and size. I asked it a question. I said, how big was Auschwitz in Poland in size? Let's see if it understands what I'm trying to ask it. It depends on what you mean by Auschwitz. There are several camps and much larger administrative areas. Approximate size is 432 acres. We know that's bullshit, by the way. And there's the entire Auschwitz camp complex, Auschwitz and Bergsen and Monitz, dozens of subcamps equal to about 15 square acres. They try to make it sound like this is possible. And by the way, to tell you guys what coke is, it's a high carbon fuel made from coal. And this is the crematoria that you would need. Assuming 6 million bodies laid side by side, not cremated, a 6 foot by 2 feet wide, basically 12 square feet, or 7 by 3 feet, which is the grave size, you need roughly 2,200 football fields. That is if they laid literally side by side and everybody was literally elbow to elbow. That's if you spread everything literally corner to corner, which we know is implausible. Like the amount of excavation that would be involved in doing all of this. And what's interesting is if you ask basically AI, what is the portion of the burned bodies of Jews to ash? It says there is no historical establishment percentage of Holocaust victims whose bodies were burned to ash. The Nazis used different methods of and body disposal in different places at different times. And records are incomplete because they destroyed much of the evidence. Oh, coincidental. Ironic, in fact, my favorite word. So you're telling me there is no evidence of burning. There is no evidence of cremation. There is no evidence of anything. We don't have enough evidence because it was all destroyed. Isn't that too ironic? Isn't that what they do right now everywhere you look? All of a sudden they go to sites like Charlie Kirk and they clean up all of the pavement and redo everything. And they say, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. Where is his shirt from the assassination? Where is his shirt? Where is the autopsy report? Why is it not public record? Because they covered up. Let's see his body. Why would they not release his body images as a public record? Because it's a cover-up and it's a PSYOP operation, and the government and Mossad all have something to do with it. This is what's going on, guys. This is what we're up against. And when you're dealing with this asinine AI chatbot over here, that when you ask it very explicit questions, it cannot give you answers because there's not enough evidence to prove any of their asinine theories. These are all asinine theories. And I will share tons of videos here scattered through without that kind of show some of these positions and how asinine they are. And I hate the fact that I sometimes have to argue with the chatbot and it will do something called circular reasoning. It is what it is because what it is. It's like somebody saying, well, the Quran is true because everybody supports it. Or there's 2 billion Muslims, therefore it's true. That's not a fact. 6 million Jews died because the ASJ, which is a Jewish-based organization that was founded in 1906 by the B'nai Brit, published all of these stats, all of these numbers, and we have to believe it? So when a Jew publishes something, we don't have to question narrative, we don't have to question motive, we don't have to question bias? Are you guys kidding me? How completely brainwashed and delusional do you guys have to be? The craziest part to me is not even that. The craziest part is the fact that we're mixed into this theology. The Christians here in America have been sucked into a theology where they're supporting a counter religion, a cult, a satanic ritualistic cult called Judaism that wants all of you Christians dead. That is the craziest psyop I've ever seen. It's not even the fact that they're Charlie Kirk's out in broad daylight and they're calling us all retards for us questioning the narrative. It's the fact that they were able to infiltrate the churches. They were able to, even right now, what they're doing is they're going into the churches and they're investing. They're becoming huge donors. Somebody comes out and says, and I'll share this clip, it's because of the Christians. It's because of Trump. We have the type of influence that we have in America. It's through the Christians that we've paved our ways. They've infiltrated the Christianity movement. Because of one stupid, basically, let me rephrase that. One verse that is stupidly worded that gives them an agenda. Those that bless will be blessed. Those that curse will be cursed, taken out of context. And then they use that and they run with it and they convince everybody that you guys are supposed to support us no matter what we do, no matter what we say, no matter what our plans are, how we plan on extinguishing all of you guys. And then they turn around and say, well, it's okay because we know that the Christians are using us. The Jews will say this, or the Jews will say, we know that the Christians are using us because they believe that the faster they get, basically we build our temple, the faster the Antichrist will come and it'll destroy all of us. And then all of a sudden their Messiah comes, which is, there's this one stupid rabbi commentator that uses him as JC. He refuses to say the word of Jesus Christ because the demons do not allow him to. He says JC because they're waiting for JC, for the second coming. Yes, we are waiting for the Christ, Jesus Christ to come. He's going to come and he's going to judge and he's going to burn and he's going to destroy. The one thing that they refuse to acknowledge is that 2/3 of the Jews, they say 2/3 of the earth. It's not 2/3 of the earth. It's 2/3 of the Jews are going to be entirely eliminated, annihilated. So it's infuriating when you're dealing with this and I mean, this is why they infiltrated the church with something called the Schofield Bible. And on the next basically podcast, I'm going to do another series about what we're talking about right now, Jewish propaganda. And we're going to expand on historically how the churches got infiltrated and why they got infiltrated and how they used the scriptures to manipulate, how they used the scriptures to get Christians to buy into their narrative.
The Christians evangelists here in America, which almost all of them are Republicans, they're probably all going to vote for Trump. And they are very pro-Israel. They are the ones that, thanks to them, United States always been with Israel in the last few decades. If you take out Christianity out of the picture, what United States had to do with Israel? The only things they are helping us is because of religion reason. But what a lot of Jews do not know is that they're not doing it for us. They are doing it only for themselves. Make no mistake. They all believe that once we will go back to the Holy Land and J.C. Penney will show up to redeem the world, he will put us all to be burned in hell. That's what they believe, because we never accepted him and we won't accept him. So why they want to help us to take over Israel, to win against the Arabs, make sure the Jews go, why they pay all these organizations that sponsor Aliyah? A lot of the people who made Aliyah, it's Christian money. All the airfare, it's all come from them. Why they are so generous? Why are they donating money to Israel? What do they care about Israel? The answer is because they believe the Messiah would come. They just have the wrong identity of the Messiah. That's it. They believe that it's actually JC. They never watch my debate with a Christian professor. They would watch it quickly. They would dump all the Christian symbols, you know where. Because it would be so obvious that it's all fake.
How they used Christians to push their propaganda agenda to infiltrate America. It wasn't through the Democrats. It was through the Christians. When religions basically, you can piggyback off of a religion, you can get them to do just about anything you want. When you say Jesus was a Jew, therefore you're supposed to love us. Abraham was a Jew, you're supposed to love us. It says, curse our nation, you will be cursed. Bless us and you will be blessed. Okay, we're going to do exactly what you say. Let's start taking stuff out of context. It's what the devil does. There's a saying that says, there's a saying that goes into the cult religions. They say judging is the worst sin. They'll say judging is worse than homosexuality. Judging is worse than being a transgender. Judging is worse than divorce or any other vice on the planet, because when you are a judge, you have no love. You have no love, and Jesus loves all. So they piggyback every which way. Or they'll piggyback and say, you can't be racist. If you're a racist, you're not a Christian. But then they're the same people that push the racist narrative that all Muslims should be, all Gazians have to be.
Right now, Israel is destroying every home in 53% of Gaza that they control and are going to keep. They said it was for self-defense. Bullshit. They just stole half of Gaza. And they're sending the bulldozers to southern Lebanon, where they're not only destroying Muslim villages, they're destroying Christian villages. The Voice of Hind Rajab is a movie that's out. It's about a 6-year-old girl. They hit the car her family's traveling in. Everyone in the car is dead except a 6-year-old. She calls in to the Palestinians to get help. They're going to send an ambulance. They triple check with the Israelis. It takes the whole day. The whole day she's on the line and she's begging. She's a 6-year-old. Please send someone to help. Please. They're all dead and I'm so hungry. The Israelis finally give permission for the ambulance to go get her. They bomb the ambulance and they kill the 6-year-old. Holy sh, man.
Make that make sense. And they say the reason we're them is because they're trying to first. With what? With what? There are 2 billion Muslims. If they wanted you dead, you would already be dead. If they wanted to exterminate you, you would already be exterminated. But the reason why you guys are not dead is because they haven't all banded forces. And if they did, you would be dead, theoretically, because it just doesn't make sense. How can something that is less than 1% of the population of the entire Muslim population have this much power, have this much influence? It's because it's a supernatural demonic force. And it says that the principalities of this world, which is Satan, control the narrative. So when Jesus came and called these people synagogues of Satan, he was literally telling them that. And the Jews, by the way, they don't believe in Satan. They believe that God is Satan and Satan is God. Did you guys know that? Did you guys know that the Jews actually don't believe that an actual Satan exists? If you read their Talmud, if you read their Torah, if you read any of the crap that they shill, they will tell you that there is no such thing as Satan. Satan is a made-up figure. It's a made-up character. They also refuse to believe that there is a hell. Well, let me break it to you, boys. You guys are going to be going to hell, and you're going to be going to hell in a handbasket. Talking to the Jews. And you're going to be unfortunately surprised that there is a hell. And it does condemn the evil and the wicked. And there is a place specifically for Lucifer's children, the synagogues of Satan. And you are it. And you will be condemned. You will be condemned for calling Mother Mary a prostitute. You will be condemned for deceiving and for ruining and destroying and for confusing and all of the lies you fabricated and created. And ultimately, you will be punished for the greatest crime of all time, crucifying the Lord Jesus Christ. When Jesus says, forgive them for they not what they do, he's not talking to you guys, Jews. He's talking to the Christians, the people that are redeemed. He's talking about to the chosen. You learn really quickly that the spirit of the Jews is the same spirit of Lucifer, which is deceit, destroy, confuse, divert, create chaos, pride, arrogance. Why would God love any of that? All of those traits are abomination to him. It even says that. Read about it in the Bible. It says all of those traits are abomination to God. That person that doesn't have a humble heart, that person that is full of arrogance, that is an abomination to Jesus Christ. That is an abomination to the Lord, to God in heaven. He doesn't support those that are arrogant. He doesn't support those that are trying to destroy and kill and ruin. God supports. It said, blessed is the peacemaker. It doesn't say blessed is the warmonger and the one that kills all the adversaries. So the fact that they're blaming Hezbollah for this and they're saying Hezbollah is the problem because Hezbollah is going to eventually kill us. Look, if Hezbollah was as big of a problem as you claim it was, they would have a long time ago. All right, Jews? So it is a lie. And it is the same lie that they're trying to spin over and over again. That it's called the big lie. And it's the more you say it, the more people start to believe it. That some of the biggest lies on this planet were there were 6 million Jews. And they said it enough times from all angles, from all these publications, from all these articles, from all of these movies, from Hollywood, from the fact that they've made it illegal for people to question cost to the point where even if you deny the cost, you can go to prison for 5, 10, 20 years, depending on where you are. Why is that? Imagine living in a world where you can't question anything, right? Imagine living in a world where you cannot question something. You cannot ask questions. This is the same world that exists here in America right now about Jews. The same world that they created during the Holocaust is the same world they created here. And they're slowly inching away towards this. They try to make Christ is King anti-Semitic. Let that sink in. Christ is King was said by Ted Cruz to be anti-Semitic. Like, are you kidding me? How is Christ is King anti-Semitic? Well, it's the context because it's excluding our neighbors. Yeah, BS. BS. And I think Ted Cruz is an antichrist. I think he quite literally is an antichrist because he believes in a demonic agenda. He believes in the anti-biblical version of what Christianity is. And he is literally protecting and enabling and scapegoating for this evil race. Racism, by the way, no matter what form it's done in, is sinful. And not the racism that was created by the Jews. The Jews created the term racism. And racism in the view of a Jew pretty much says if you say anything that questions or discriminates or does anything, and the only reason they created it that way was because they understood that if they made this word so extreme that it would protect them against them, other people hating them. So this is why they coined their own verse. See, the blacks, when you hate blacks or quote unquote discriminatory towards blacks, they don't have their own word like the Jews do. To be anti-Semitic, that means you're hating a specific race. No other race on this planet has coined their own racist term other than the Jews. Let that sink in. Where do you suppose that racism comes from? The term racism. Yes, racism was created. The term racism was created and coined by a Jew. Yeah, there was a lot said, a lot of information. I'm going to be sharing lots of video, lots of content, lots of basically stuff about this. Stay tuned for more. Veto Creed, God, Grit, and Glory.